Hi, my name is Pat McConnell. I'm very happy today to be here to talk about strategic risk management, specifically the increasing the chances of succeeding in your strategic endeavors. I'd first like to thank Alex for setting this up and note that I'm going to talk about a few different issues. First of all, most strategies fail. And we've got to go back and ask why. And basically that goes back and asking what is a business strategy, and specifically one particular topic, which is strategic positioning. And for this forum, what are the risks in strategic positioning? Specifically, a little bit about strategic risk assessment, and then a very little bit about strategic execution risk. Note this is overview only. There are materials that are referenced later in the slides. Most strategies fail. What do these firms have in common? Lehman Brothers, IBM, Microsoft, BlackBerry, and many, many more. They all failed to implement a chosen business strategy. Some failed completely, some were badly damaged and survived, some recovered after major losses, and some even went on to try other more successful strategies. Strategy is hard. Only consultants think strategy is easy. Strategy is risky, probably the riskiest decision a board can make. Strategy is unavoidable because change is inevitable. Strategy is ceaseless. Strategy is not a destination, it's a springboard. It's depressing, but most business strategies fail, often miserably. Slavatsky and Dreisig, who are the gurus of strategic risk management, suggest that as a starting point, a firm should assume that the chances of success in any real business strategy are initially set to 40% or less. That is, a business strategy is more likely to fail than to succeed. When did you last go to the board and say, we've a great strategy to make lots of money, but the chances of it working are at best 40%? Pretty career limiting, eh? Most large technology initiatives also fail according to the IEEE. So what are the chances of a business strategy that relies on technology succeeding? Very small. 40% at best for business, 25% at best for technology, which equals 10% or less for the overall strategic execution. What would happen if you went to the board and said, we have a really great digital transformation strategy, but the chances of it failing are over 90%. That's even more career limiting. So how can we improve the chances of success? To improve the chances of success, we must identify the factors that will increase the likelihood of success by reducing risks, measure those factors that will have most impact on success, and proactively minimize the factors that will reduce the likelihood of failure and maximize the chances of success. In other words, we must manage the strategic risks. It's not easy. Developing and implementing a strategy that will work requires planning and discipline. A consultant's 2x2 matrix just won't cut it. And failure to manage the risks in any strategy guarantees failure. First, a quick apology. If the video is jerky, it's because the files are absolutely huge, and I'm not a professional video editor, but I will continue anyway. Questions for a board. Where is the business going? In what direction should the business be going? Ideally, where should the business be in, say, 5-10 years' time? And how do we get to where we should be in 5 or 10 years' time? These are some of the toughest existential questions faced by boards and management. But do we even have enough information to answer these questions? And in fact, do we even know which questions to ask? We need a strategy. In order to get to where we want the business to be in the long term, we need a strategy. What is a strategy? There are hundreds of definitions of strategy in the business and military literature. Professor Margaret Porter, the strategy guru, has an elegant summary. A strategy is a combination of the ends or the goals for which the firm is striving and the means or policies by which it is seeking to get there. Note, strategy is not merely where you want to go, the ends, but also how you're going to get there, the means. In academic terminology, strategic positioning is where you want to go, the ends, and strategic execution is how you're going to get there, the means. In this presentation, we will concentrate only on strategic positioning and specifically the firm's desired strategic position. While superior strategic execution and implementation is absolutely vital, Failure to select an achievable strategic position will make all the implementation efforts and costs potentially worthless. Selecting an achievable and sustainable strategic position is probably the hardest and most risky decision a board will ever make. What is strategy? Strategy is going from where we are today to where we want to be in the future, starting at the strategic baseline or current state and moving to the strategic position, the desired state. In order to get there, we have a strategic plan, which will require resources, people, capital, time. What are the big strategic questions? Is the current strategic position sustainable? People forget that one. The business may disappear because a competitor is just about to emerge on the horizon. Is the desired strategic position achievable? It's not achievable. Why are we going there? Is the strategy viable? Is the plan to get from where we are today to where we want to be achievable? And do we have sufficient resources? Business academic Professor Freek Vermeulen argues that many strategies fail because they're not a strategy. For example, we want to be number one in our chosen markets as a goal, not a strategy. It does not say how that goal is to be achieved or even whether it is achievable. A real strategy involves a clear set of choices that define what a firm is going to do and what it's not going to do. Many strategies fail to get implemented despite the ample efforts of hardworking people because they do not represent a set of clear choices. Without clarity as to what success actually looks like, low-level managers cannot make rational business decisions as to how to progress the firm's strategy. A good strategy will provide a solid framework for making sound long-term business decisions. Art Leckey, a noted US military strategist, envisaged strategy as a three-legged stool: ends, ways, and means. The ends are the objectives or the goals of the strategy, the ways, the actions or concepts needed to achieve the ends, and means, the resources needed to achieve the ends or objectives. If these three legs are unbalanced, the entire strategy will be at risk. And the greater the imbalance, the greater the risk. So the strategic risk results from an imbalance on those three legs of Leckey's strategy tool. Most firms underestimate the resources needed to achieve strategic objectives. Most firms do not set meaningful, achievable strategic objectives. And most firms do not make realistic plans to implement their chosen strategy. Strategic risk. If you don't know where you're going, or if you don't know how you're going to get there, or you don't know what resources you need to get there, what are your chances of success? Pretty close to zero. There are a few definitions of strategic risk in the literature, but here we will use one based on ISO 31000. Strategic risk is the effect of uncertainty on strategic objectives. Using an ISO 31000 framework, a board, having defined the objectives of the strategy, can then identify uncertainties, measure the risks, and treat and mitigate those risks. How to improve the chances of success? To increase the chances of success in a strategy, uncertainty must be reduced. But how to reduce uncertainty? First, we must gather and analyze more information. Then we must gather and analyze even more information. And finally, we must gather and analyze even more information. In making any decision, one can never have enough information. But after a time, the benefits of collecting additional information does not justify the cost, so-called paralysis by analysis. Like any project, the more work that's done up front, the greater chances of success. There are so many ways to fail. We can achieve a strategic position, or we can achieve a nearly strategic position, which is acceptable. We can achieve a strategic position that's unacceptable. We can completely fail to achieve the strategic position, or we can just stop the project, as happens quite often when it's obvious that it's running into problems. Every strategy is unique. Firms start from different places with different skills and capabilities. Every strategy position is unique. A firm's strategic objectives will be different to competitors. Every strategic plan is unique. Different processes and legacy systems have to be changed. And every strategy has unique risks. Despite what consultants claim, there is no such thing as a generic strategy. Strategic positioning. What is a strategic position? For a for-profit firm, the strategic position is a clear statement of how it plans to attain sustainable profitability. It attempts to ask the question, where should we be in 5 to 10 years' time? A good strategic position will be sustainable, producing long-term, not transient benefits. Achievable, can be achieved in a reasonable time and costs, and risks that can be managed. Worth achieving will significantly improve the firm's position in the market. That is not trivial. Adaptable, can adapt to changing market realities. Defensible, can be defended against competitors. Clear and logical, the rationale can be communicated clearly to staff and stakeholders. A good strategic position is a springboard, not a destination. What does a strategic position consist of? A strategic position consists of 6 key components: the competitive position, the markets, products, and customer segments being targeted; the business model, a description of the business model needed to provide value in the desired competitive position; strategic objectives, descriptions of the objectives, goals, and targets that will deliver the value desired from the target business model; strategic plan, a high-level description of the actions needed to achieve the strategy; strategic capabilities, total resources, capital, people, and so forth needed to deliver the objectives and the business model desired; and strategic risks, the many and varied risks created by the combination of the above. What is a strategic option? There's not one possible future strategic position for a firm, but many, most of which are unobtainable, for example, because of lack of resources. For any firm, there's a large number of distinct strategic options for the future. Strategic positioning involves the identification and assessment of viable strategic options, and then making the critical decision as to which option will be the best, or at least an acceptable strategic position that is sustainable, achievable, etc. The narrowing down of possible future states to a viable strategic position is a non-trivial process that requires discipline and skill. It's certainly much more than a consultant's 4x4 matrix. So strategic positioning then is the process of identifying and analyzing strategic options and then deciding on the best strategic position. Strategic positioning risk. There are multiple tools in the strategy literature to identify, for example, the risks in a competitive position. The key is to use multiple tools or strategic lenses to view risks from multiple perspectives, what's called triangulation. So, for example, the strategic lenses might be the SWOT analysis, Porter's industry model, PESO, business model canvas, value chain, etc. But in order to use those lenses, you must make the same set of assumptions for each one of the tools, and you must identify the risks that are coming out of those particular analyses. It's important that existing strategy tools be used to analyze strategic risks. It's not worth reinventing the wheel for tools that are specifically for risk analysis. Instead, use the tools that are there for strategy analysis. You can identify risks using Osterwalder's business model canvas. I'm not going to explain the canvas, but it's pretty well known. It's about how you interact with your suppliers, your customers, your regulators, and how strategic risks, both financial and non-financial, arise from that. It should be noted here that there are 4 key risk domains: customers, suppliers, competitors, and regulators. You should build up a strategic risk register using a number of different strategic lenses. And for example, you can register from your SWOT analysis, from your value chain analysis, your other lenses, and business model canvas, and then organize those by 4 key dimensions: customers, suppliers, competitors, and regulators. Ideally, different people would do different analysis so that we can get rid of particular biases. Strategic risk assessment, a huge topic, which I'll just touch upon here. Any significant strategy will take 5 to 7 years to execute, and thus strategists and planners operate in an environment of extreme uncertainty. Strategic risk is very different to other risks, such as credit, market, and operational, because it cannot be hedged or insured. This means that all significant strategic risks and their key risk factors must be mitigated. There is no alternative. And many of the factors that will impact the success of a strategy cannot be determined with any degree of precision. So unfortunately, most of the assessment of strategic options will be by necessity be qualitative. Qualitative assessment means asking critical questions identified earlier and then assessing on a scale how important they are. For example, is the strategic position achievable? If it's difficult to achieve, then the risk will be high. Is a strategic position worth achieving, or is it just low-hanging fruit? It'll be high if the costs don't justify returns. Is the rationale for a strategic position clear and logical? It'll be high risk if not. With strategy, most risks will be high in certain circumstances. And it must be noted here that different strategies involve different risks. Johnson and Scholes, the gurus of strategy, define 4 main types of strategy which have different impacts on the organization and markets, and hence will be very different risks. So, for example, the productivity strategy will be low as regards organizational impact, and it will adapt existing processes. Whereas in the other end of the extremes, growth strategies invariably involve the highest risks because they're dealing with high organizational impact and new target markets. To complicate matters, most strategies are in reality some combination of these main types. How do you compare strategic options? Risk matrices may be used in qualitative assessment, but are not definitive and must be used with care. So here what we have is a number of different strategic options organized by their strategic positioning risk and their strategic execution risk. So for example, strategic option 1 is high on positioning, i.e. difficult to achieve, but relatively low on strategic execution risk, can be achieved relatively simply. So it really is just a roll of the dice. Strategic option 2 is not strategic, it's really low-hanging fruit. When strategic 4 is both high on strategic positioning risk and high on strategic execution risk, so it's much too risky. So somewhere in there will be something which aligns with the firm's strategic risk appetite. For example, here, strategic option 5 and 6. Strategists operate in an environment of extreme uncertainty. Any estimates such as costs, market share, customer acquisition, product uptake, etc. can only ever be approximated within a range. For example, target market share is 12 to 17%. And all meaningful variables can only be estimated with uncertainty. With such extreme uncertainty, it's not possible to use conventional spreadsheets. Too many interactions between the variables. A monte-carlo simulation, or MCS, must be used. With MCS, it's not the end result that's paramount, but the identification of the factors that most impact the result. These factors can then be targeted for the highest level of risk management. This example shows an MCS model of variable financial measures over time by delivery channels, by customer segments, by product family, and so on. So we started the business unit, we analyzed the different product families. Under those product families, we analyzed the different customer segments targeted, the different delivery channels reaching each one of those segments. And then over the time, the resources used, the revenues, the costs, the earnings, in such a way that we could build up a pattern of a range of potential outcomes. It's absolutely vital that all assumptions must be consistent in all models, and assumptions include economic assumptions, industry assumptions, market, and product. This is why MCS is has to be very, very disciplined. This example shows the outputs from a Monte-Carlo simulation of the capital needed to execute a sample strategy, and importantly, the factors that drive the estimated capital. It's only an example. So for example, at the end of the Monte-Carlo simulation, there's an output which shows the distribution of a particular variable here, the likely range of capital used from 10 to 20 million and how it's distributed. Better information can increase understanding and reduce risks. So for example, what's called here a sensitivity analysis or a tornado chart shows those factors which contribute most to the product to the final result on capital, and it shows here the biggest impacts are from productivity and purchase costs. Building an MCS model is too large a topic to discuss here. However, the important thing to note is that the benefits of building an MCS model is not to find a precise solution, but it is the development of the logic of the model and describing the relationships between the variables and factors that is most important. By better understanding the relationships and relative importance of the variables or factors using sensitivity analysis that drives success, we can reduce uncertainty and hence risk. The better we understand the factors that impact success, the more likely a strategy will be a success. Strategic execution risks. Choosing a strategic position is only half the job. The strategy must be executed. And strategic execution is replete with risks, including failure to develop a coherent, achievable strategic plan, failure to assign necessary resources, failure to create the organization needed to execute the strategic plan, failure to engage and energize stakeholders with a coherent vision, failure to stick to the strategic plan, so-called short-termism, but also failure to change strategic plans when external and internal environments change. Failure to manage business as usual, which is something that people often forget, and many, many more. Without good strategic positioning and good strategic execution, failure is inevitable. So what are the strategic gaps? We have the assumed desired strategic position and the envisaged strategic plan and the assumed strategic baseline. But in fact, actually, the assumed strategic baseline is not the actual strategic baseline, given that competitors may already be moving on your markets. The envisaged strategic plan never goes to plan, and so the actual strategic plan zigzags all over the place. And what we actually achieve at the end is the achieved strategic position, which is almost always not the same as the desired strategic position. And that's the gaps that create the strategic execution risks. So just to summarize, attempting a new strategy is one of the hardest things a board can do. Deciding on a viable, sustainable strategic position, that is where we're going, is one of the riskiest decisions a board can make. If a firm does not know where it's going, failure is baked into the strategy. Selecting a viable strategic position takes deep industry knowledge, insights, superior analysis skills, creativity to work out the various strategic options, discipline to analyze each one of those options, perseverance, and lots and lots and lots of courage to keep in the program. If these are missing, what chance success? Just a quick couple of references. The strategic risk management and strategic technology risk are from risk books, and discounts are available for risk awareness participants. There's a whole series of other references available to what I've talked about earlier on, and they will be provided in the attendant material. So thank you very much for giving me the time to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is strategic risk management. And I hope everything on the Risk Awareness Week works well, thanks to Alexei.